George Parros and Gary Bettman responded to criticism of the NHL player safety process, and Bettman also wants to keep the playoffs as they are. Is he right? Plus the big games to watch this weekend on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. How we doing this week, Gil?
We're doing. We're in the stretch drive. Every game is important, and it's an exciting time to be a hockey fan.
It is, unfortunately for Gary Bettman, he's had to address some issues that have come up recently due to incidents on the ice and that very home stretch playoff race here that has reignited that part of the conversation. We'll get to that later in the show and preview the best games to watch this weekend. But the biggest story that has continued to bubble up, I think the timing of the GM meetings did not help the situation as far as the Radko Gudas suspension and the ensuing complaints about how short it was relative to the impact of the injury. And as we know, since then, Austin Matthews had surgery and he's officially out. When we knew he was out for the season, but it's a 12-week recovery process.
Yeah, and in 12 weeks, the Toronto Maple Leafs will be playing golf, so that is
maybe going to some summer weddings and starting to think about getting back.
A little fishing here and there, but whatever the case may be, they will not be playing hockey in the playoffs at that point. So his season is officially done, and obviously the punishment does not fit the crime. Let's put it that way. We talked about this last week. And I think what's come out to us in the last 6 days since then only reinforces the fact that 5 games and a telephone hearing, which they announced before they even knew the extent of the injury, by the way, when you're supposed to be taking the extent of the injury into consideration, rings hollow. It rings hollow.
Right. And we talked about this last week because the incident was pretty fresh, right? So now we've had a little bit of time and we have that additional context. And, Parros said a lot about the decision-making process and, they have a careful consideration and a bunch of different people look at it and they have discussions about it. And, he sounds like a certain someone else when he says some of the best guys are working on this. But he talks about veteran players and that, that current players should be confident in what this group of people does and how they come to their conclusions there. And, Gary Bettman went to bat for him as well, basically saying similar things there. And, we've also had other players complain about it. When Connor McDavid, who's like the face of your game, essentially said, this isn't right. Like, how do you not respond directly to the specifics of those criticisms?
Yeah, you could talk all you want about the process and how it's supposed to work and how great minds are involved. But you know what? If great minds get together and tell me 2 + 2 = 5, I'm still not going to believe it. And ultimately, the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is rotten. It doesn't pass the smell test. So if this many people are unhappy with the outcome, then telling me the process is fair just doesn't work, because the results is what matters the most. And you're not, the algorithm could be fair, but what's coming out on the other end doesn't make sense.
Right. And I think the argument being made by, Austin Matthews' agent and McDavid, who has the same agent, I believe, they are saying it doesn't really matter about the whole time served situation for Radko Gudas, that 5 was the max, given how long it had been since his previous suspension, that the impact has to have more weight. And then Gary Bettman says, well, y'all agreed to this in the CBA, that this is the process. And I think that, there's wiggle room here, right? There's room to say, okay, but if you look at, even though, Gary, we've only had, he said 18 suspensions over the last 15 years for kneeing for this specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so it doesn't matter how often or how rare it is. It's a highly impactful play and subsequent injury. Like it could only happen once and it would be bad.
Right. And let's also take a step back here. It's called the Department of Player Safety.
Right.
So
it's not the Department of Player Protection, for the offender.
Right. The job is to keep the game safe. And to keep the game safe, knee-on-knee hits, as infrequent as they may or may not be, are one of the more dangerous plays in hockey. So, you want to do everything you can to deter that from happening. So you want harsh punishments on knee hits to keep them infrequent. And then B, to me, if both sides admit something isn't working, like you said, there's wiggle room. Both sides can agree that they need some modifications on the fly.
Right.
Because, like I said, if the algorithm says 2 + 2 = 5, that doesn't make it so.
Right. Exactly. I know. I kind of feel like Marissa Tomei and My Cousin Vinny. It's like the defense is wrong here. Like,
Cause distraction, baby.
I know. Iconic. Anyway, I just think that there has to be wiggle room, and that, like I said, if something happens once, that should be enough to have the right kind of response to it here. And we know, regardless of how long it's been since Gudas has been suspended, he has a history of problematic plays. Whether it incurred a suspension or a fine or not does not matter. The history is there. The play was egregious from every angle that you watch it at. That play was egregious. And you have to be able to look at the spirit of the law and not the letter of the law in this circumstance.
There was no justification. There was no excuse. It wasn't like, oh, yeah, Matthews had his head down, or it was a split second. This was just a plain out, flagrant, dirty play. And like you said, no matter what angle you looked at it, no matter how you tried to rationalize it, it all just did not add up to anything other than this was a flagrantly dirty play. A star player got injured and is lost for the season as a result. Mm-hmm. And let's even take it a step further. If this happened in November instead of in March, you're talking about a guy missing almost half the season as a result of this injury. So you really have to look at it that way, because just because it happened toward the end of the season, and
to a team that's not going to make the playoffs.
Correct.
Doesn't matter.
No,
does not matter.
Should not matter at all. This is a situation where the guy is going to miss 3 months of a 6-month season if this happens, in November or December. You're talking about almost half the year, and it just the punishment has to fit the crime, and it doesn't. It doesn't even come close. And I think even acknowledging this, the fact that they decided on a telephone hearing before they knew the extent of the injury, or the fact that if they did know the extent of the injury, they kind of ignored it, that alone is something that could be easily adjusted and fixed without redoing the CBA.
Right. And I think the appeals process for this is also inherently flawed, right? So when Gary Bettman is the place you go to appeal these decisions, and Bettman has to own the player safety department as part of his responsibilities as commissioner, right? So he's responsible ultimately for the hire of Parros to lead that department and for the success of that department when he has to go to the Board of Governors and say, I'm a good commissioner for the league because I do all of this for you, right? Like that doesn't work, right?
No, it doesn't work. But what does work and why Gary Bettman remains commissioner and has been so successful is he can turn to the owners and say, I've made you a lot of money over the last 30 years. And he's right. I mean,
He's correct.
yeah. But let's also face this. If you end up with unfair suspensions and dangerous plays in the league because you're not taking care of this aspect of your job, that hurts the reputation of the league and that can cost the league money.
Right. And I think like when your product, aka the players, are complaining very loudly, that affects the money side of things, right?
Yeah, absolutely can. And it can affect how smoothly the next CBA negotiations go, if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it should. And I think the players should demand, a reconsideration of this process. But the GM meetings had more to say than just about this one incident and player safety. And we are going to talk about goaltender interference and the playoff format, which is, a whole other fun ball of wax. We'll get to that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. College basketball is nonstop, big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want, rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever fits my read. And you can mix things like spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see the slate playing out. Then you can apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. So go safe, go bold, ride with the team you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style, now with even more upside behind it as the tournament gets underway. So head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game.
Don't forget to check out our Everydayer Club for ad-free episodes and access to a group chat for your favorite NHL team and more. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayerclub to learn more. So the NHL GM meetings talked about more than trying to defend the player safety department here. You talked about goalie reviews once again, because as we well know, nobody knows what goaltender interference is. And it's all based on vibes and you know it when you see it, right?
It's right now, what was that in math? It's undefined.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an imaginary number.
It's an imaginary number. It's, what was that? The square root of 0 was undefined. Was that it? I am trying to remember. But yeah, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. There's no consistency. And look, I understand Gary Bettman is going to publicly defend that and say it works. But if you look at 2 or 3 replays at random with almost identical things happening and different outcomes being called on the ice and after review, enough to say that nobody knows what goalie interference is. And the league at the very least needs to be consistent. It almost doesn't matter what they say it is within certain parameters, but consistency is the ultimate thing, because if they're consistent, the players know what they can and cannot do. Everybody knows what to expect, what's going to be overturned, what's appealable, that you have a decent chance of winning. Right now, it's all undefined.
Yeah, it's interesting because Bettman, was defending the video replay process and system in all of this as it relates to goaltender interference reviews. And I don't begrudge them the difficulty of defining it, and it is hard. Like I don't disagree with that. It is sometimes hard to tell, and it's hard to tell when you're looking at something full speed versus slow-mo, right? All of these things affect your perception of whether or not a play is goaltender interference or not. But the problem, to your point, is the consistency, where it's hard to suss out exactly what they're going to call and what they're not. And what I found really questionable in how Bettman was talking about this is that he says, like, if you look at the body of work, I think our video replay system not only has been a leader among the sports leagues because all the other systems are modeled on ours, it has held up extraordinarily well. Yeah, you're going to get calls that some people disagree with, but it works. Like, I don't think the NHL play review system is lauded amongst all the sports. I just don't. I think that's categorically untrue.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anybody praising it.
No.
Now, what sports commissioners and executives do behind closed doors and don't make public, I can't say. But I have not heard anybody. I mean, I guess Bettman is saying imitation is the highest form of flattery, so they're all copying us, so therefore they like it. But
I mean, you're an NFL guy. Is pass interference is that just as difficult to suss out as goaltender interference?
Maybe what is a catch is kind of in that category in the NFL right now. Nobody can tell you what a catch is and what a catch isn't. So yeah, maybe it is working just as well as the NHL, but not well. Right, exactly. Poorly, but just as well as the National Hockey League. So
I know, it's insane. So, to be continued on that aspect of it as well. And my personal feeling on the matter is that there needs to be more attention paid to goaltending from a rules and, support perspective in terms of what the rules of goaltending are, like, so that goalies can train themselves to play in that way, and how that is affected by the league's desire to have more scoring, and how do you protect the goaltenders in that circumstance. I think there's a lot to work on that front in terms of that balance between having goalies be a robust position that have a little freedom to do their thing, but also protect them and also have scoring. So I understand it's a complex problem, but I think what they're doing now isn't enough.
No.
The other thing that's, I think, less of a complex problem is the playoff format, which Gary Bettman continues to defend this division rival format for it in terms of who plays who in the first round. And I think that much like with the evolution of the game with how overtime works and adding the shootout and all of this, and how they evolved from having an all-star game every year to it's getting a little stale. Let's do this World Cup thing and we'll go to the Olympics and we'll do it again. Like the game has to evolve, right? And so we evolved into this playoff format, and now it's stale. And we've seen its shortcomings, and it's okay to say that. We've said it about other things in the game. Why can't we say that this is now stale and it's not working the way it originally did?
Yeah, I mean, look, there is no perfect playoff format. And just like any other system that you're trying to fix, you're always fixing the problems with the last format, and that creates new problems. It's time to create new problems. Okay. I mean, the system is stale when the LA Kings and the Edmonton Oilers meet 4 years in a row in the playoffs. And here's the thing. I look at right now the Central Division in the NHL. The three teams with the best record in the league at various points this year have been in the Central Division, and two of them are going to go head to head in round one.
Yeah, the playoffs started today. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think it's almost a lock that two of them have to go head to head, and we don't know which two and who's going to have home ice, but two of those teams are going to face each other in the first round of the playoffs. And that is not a fair reward that the team with the third best record out of 32 gets to play the team with the second best record out of 32 in the first round of the playoffs. That's not rewarding regular season success.
Right. And when you look at the different divisions, there's such a disparity between them, where the top team in the Pacific is in 14th place in the NHL. 14th. And so that skews everything as well. So you have, Anaheim gets to play Utah, who's so much better than Anaheim, but Anaheim gets home ice advantage because they're arbitrarily top of the Pacific Division, even though Utah is a much better team standings wise, right?
Yeah.
And that's why this is not working this year. And I think it's okay to put a term limit on some of these things where you say, this is our new playoff format. We're going to do one, top 8, 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7. We're going to do that. And we're going to do it for 10 years. And then we're going to change it again. And just know that there's an expiration date on it, because we know it's going to get stale. And that's how I think you need to approach it.
Theoretically, it should be renovated every time there's a CBA.
Yeah.
And both sides just have to renegotiate it. And you talk about 1 versus 8 in the conference, I'd be fine with that. I'd even be fine with 1 versus 16, 2 versus
in the
15.
whole league.
Do we need an East-West thing anymore at this point? I mean, what difference does it make?
I mean, there's costs involved there with
there
travel.
There are costs involved, but it's the fairest system.
It is the fairest system. I mean, I think it would be fun theoretically.
And you get different matchups every year too.
Right. I mean, when we talk about that Edmonton LA matchup, at least, for now, the one saving grace of all this is that it would be Vegas versus Edmonton in the first round now. So yay, we get that win. But, it is absolutely stale, and something needs to give here. I think the only reason why the East playoff matchups look better is that there's been a little bit more upheaval, and there's some different teams in the mix that are affecting it. But even like Tampa versus Montreal in the first round, I'm bored. I'm already bored.
And the way the standings are right now, those matchups will change by tonight, let alone tomorrow or a week from now, or, in a month when the season is over. So,
well, speaking of that, we got to play some games to figure all that out. And there are some good ones this weekend. So we will talk about the best ones to watch coming up next. There is nothing like being in an NBA arena with the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting those tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with you, the fans. You can pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and get those tickets locked in within minutes. The best part is you can see the view from your seat before you buy, which makes the decision easier. Plus, the zone deals stand out, where you choose the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you can save even more. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. That's code Locked On for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. All right, so looking at these big matchups, one of them that we were just talking about in the playoff race, they face each other again because they're division rivals, right? So the Stars will be visiting the Wild on Saturday, which could end up being a playoff preview here.
Yeah, very well. This could be the first round matchup. In fact, as of right now, this would be the first round matchup. And it's two of the best teams in the league right now. They are separated by 6 points. And look, this is going to be one heck of a game. No question about that.
Yeah. And, with all the changes that Minnesota in particular has made this season to try and tweak things to give them the right formula, I think we've had enough of time since the trade deadline and since the Quinn Hughes deal that they should be gelling, and this would be a pretty good indicator of what this Wild team is going to look like.
No doubt. And again, it's getting that chemistry right for the playoffs that is so critical.
Absolutely is. Now, going back to the playoff race and how the in-division standings will look out versus the wild card here for those top three versus the wild card. This Boston at Detroit game is super important, right?
Yeah, both teams need this, and the Atlantic Division standings are so tight right now. Boston and Detroit hold the two wild cards, and they have the same number of points. So you're talking about a very important game, and these two teams going head to head on national television in the United States should be one heck of a game.
Yeah, and the tiebreaker right now is that regulation wins. And so if Detroit wins this game, like that would even them up with regulation wins there and give them the points edge. So it's an extremely important game. I'd say slightly more so for Detroit in these circumstances here, but should be a good one. Again, original six, can't go wrong with that. Looking at some of the other games, there's a whole lot of back-to-backs happening right now with the condensed schedule, especially post-Olympics. I think every team has a back-to-back almost every week for the remainder of the season here. And the Columbus Blue Jackets are part of that, where they face the Kraken on Saturday, which is the first half of that back-to-back. Super important game for both teams.
Yeah, the Kraken are right now 1 point out of a wild card. They are 5 points back of third place in the Pacific, but 7 points out of first place. So, that Pacific division, not the strongest division in the league, but certainly bunched up pretty tight. Seattle needs the win badly. And, so does Columbus right now. They are barely in the playoff on a tiebreaker because they've played one fewer game than the Islanders. This one is going down to the wire, and both teams need this game. And again, winning in regulation is critical for tiebreakers right now.
Yeah, and Columbus is in the top three in the Metro right now, but they've been on an absolute tear for the second half of the season. Again, since the coaching change, 7-0-3 in their last 10. They've won 3 in a row now. And it is going to be a tough game for the Kraken coming into Columbus for this one. But I think, if you're Columbus here, you obviously have to focus on that game, but then you got to turn around and think about the second half of that back-to-back on Sunday against your New York Islanders, who they're neck and neck with, right?
Yeah, the difference right now is a game in hand. They're tied in the standings, and both teams will be coming off a back-to-back as the Islanders are in Montreal on Saturday. So,
which is a big game for both of those teams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I got to add this. Is Zach Werenski the most underrated or underappreciated star player in this league right now?
Could be. Honestly, could be. There's an argument to be made there for sure. Just because Columbus does not get the flowers that it deserves. And, being a smaller market team, they just don't get the spotlight the way they should. And he's just been a tremendous driver for the blue line there. And, we've talked in the past about Werenski's injury problems, and he's stayed healthy, knock on wood. And that's been a huge, huge difference maker for that team.
Absolutely. And I mean, we saw him in the Olympics, what he can do.
Yep.
Where are the Blue Jackets without him right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a valid question. I think, the complete team there has taken tremendous steps forward. I think their system is a lot better now. I think they adjust a lot better now, but I think that will be on full display when they have to play two very different teams in the Seattle Kraken and the New York Islanders. I think, from an outside perspective, the Islanders' style of play is such a grind, and it's sometimes difficult to watch, but they get it done. And so that's going to be the interesting challenge for Columbus.
Two different teams that they have to face. They've got to make those adjustments, but they've got a coach who's good at it.
Yep, they absolutely do. But A lot of great NHL action this weekend as we get into our last month of the season. And I can't believe that has happened.
Flew by.
I know. But that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. And once again, don't forget to check out our Everydayer Club for those ad-free episodes and more. You can go to lockedonpodcast.com/everydayerclub to learn more. Gil will be back on Monday to talk to some hosts from around the Locked On NHL channel about what's going on in these playoff races. And we'll see you back here next Friday. Have a great hockey weekend, everyone.